It really ain't the place nor time to reel off rhyming diction. But yet we'll write a final rhyme while waiting crucifixion. For we bequeath a parting tip of sound advice for such men who come across in transport ships to polish off the Dutchmen. If you encounter any Boers, you really must not loot 'em. And if you wish to leave these shores, for pity's sake, don't shoot 'em.
Letters from the front. A Miss Johnson of the Kyneton Hospital has received from her uncle, Mr. E.H. Hocking, a member of the 1st Victorian contingent during service in South Africa, a very interesting letter. It is dated April the 12th, 1900, and was written from Bloemfontein. We make some extracts. Quote, "We are supposed to be resting here, having just finished a 14-day trip, but all the rest we are getting is being bothered about saddles, stirrup irons, and other things. I'm getting quite used to shells bursting around and bullets whistling past. One quickly gets used to being under fire. Every different kind of bullet makes a different sound, and from chaps under cover such remarks as these may be heard as the bullets whiz past. There goes a Mauser. That's a Martini. That's one of our own. And when you hear a crack like a cat whip, you know that it's an explosive. The latter is a terrible thing to be struck with before it explodes. I saw one of our lads struck with an explosive at Hobkirk's. The bullet exploded in his chest and he died immediately. I fancy the war would not last much longer if only the cowards would meet us in the open. We would finish them off in no time. We now have the privilege of shaving, but only on the condition of keeping shaved. As there are only half a dozen razors between 100 men, several of us have resolved to keep our hair on. I have grown a full beard. We've been engaged in collecting arms and ammunition from the Free Staters, who have given in and have handed in every imaginable kind of firearm, from the old-fashioned blunderbuss and muzzle-loading shotguns to the more recent Mauser, and even our own Lee Metford was collected. Also thousands of rounds of ammunition corresponding with the weapons. Towards the end of the 14-day trip, the horses gave out. One handful of bran and another of mealies was reckoned to feed, and that was what each horse got night and morning. The last day or two we had biscuits only to give to the horses. Naturally, no horse fed like that could work day after day, and several knocked up, in consequence of which several of us had to walk and each drag his knocked-up horse. Some of the poor brutes, when they have their rugs on, put one in mind of a clothes horse with a tablecloth thrown over it. They were so fine that if they were much finer you would be unable to see them. As to washing, well, we are all quite accustomed to going 3 or 4 days without, but when there is a chance of a good old bath, we know how to appreciate it. Our clothes are in a rather ragged and dirty state as we have only one suit of everything, and that we wear. For a long time we have been without tents, and often we get drenched at night. We have a waterproof sheet, which we place on the ground, on that our blankets folded double, then a couple of bags, if you are lucky to get hold of them, and lastly we put our greatcoats on top. Then we get in between the blankets and pull the bags and coat over us. Well, it comes on to rain, and when you are laying, you form a dam, and suddenly you wake up and find yourself soaking. Undressing is next thought of. Boots and tunic are all we ever take off. Tomorrow, I believe, is Good Friday, and while you at home are all enjoying yourselves with seasonable luxuries, your Uncle Teddy and his comrades are having their luxuries too. Dry bread and coffee without milk, breakfast, boiled beef like old Boots for dinner, tea and dry bread for tea. What do you think of that for a luxurious repast? But there is a better time coming. I'll be able to tell you many funny things about campaigning when I get back. Here is one anecdote. We were camped near the Royal Irish Regiment. The country is all koppies, which are massive heaps of rocks and earth. One remarked to one of the Royal Irish, "Plenty of land around here, isn't there, chum?" To which came the reply, "Be jabbers, there is too. There is too much land that they had to stuck it in little heaps all over the place, for they had not enough room to spread it out." Someone else said that the Britisher, before going into action, always has what may be his last look at anything precious to him. but the Australian makes sure his dashed good day's feed for himself in his haversack. Right, I'm now in Brunswick. The old place, the Sarah Sands Hotel. Came and saw many bands here, and we've got a monument, of course. Now, I'm not sure whether this is it, but I'm hoping. And this is well, once again, this is where my grandfather grew up, in Brunswick. We've got to get over to that reserve in the middle there. That looks like a sort of place you'd have a Boer War monument. And I saw a guy on a plinth wearing a slouch hat. It's been a hell of a day. I had to come directly through the city in my car, and the GPS all the way didn't want me to do that, but that's the way I know, and fortunately it still works. Trust the ways you know. Oh. See, they've even changed the council names around here. Maybe that's why I couldn't find Hooper Reserve. Maybe they renamed it. Anyway, look at this. This looks promising. There's two of them actually. What the hell? A little drinking fountain. All chained up. Sad. No. That's not it. So yeah, I think I don't think it's this one either. There's too many names here. You'll see in a minute. Oh no, we found it. Once again, I doubted myself. It's a lot of names because a lot of people went. There he is. Now I'm impressed. This is brilliant. Lest we forget, erected by the citizens of Brunswick to perpetuate the noble deeds of our Brunswick boys who fought for the Empire in the South African War, 1899 to 1902. You all know those dates now. And to honour Private S.J. Bernard, killed at Wilmansrust, the 12th of June 1901. Private R.C. Harrison, killed at Vryheid, the 5th of November 1901. Trooper J.V. Cairns, Wardren Scouts. We'll look up and see what they are, the Wardren Scouts. Looking into the unit known as Wardren Scouts, there's very little information available on the internet, but I have found a few things of interest. It seems that Waldron, or Waldon more commonly, was a captain, Captain W.M. Hugh Walden, and had been in the mining industry, and he enlisted units directly in South Africa. They seem to be units that were privately raised and for a set period of time, perhaps 3 months at a time. Many men during the war, probably for a bit of adventure in Queen, King and Empire, made their own way to South Africa, enlisted in locally raised units upon arrival. Mostly short-term enlistments, 3 to 6 months, and quite often in 2 or 3 or more different units during the war. It seems that something like 16,000 Australians served in the Boer War, and around 6,000 found their own way to South Africa to enlist in locally raised units. Finally, the unit only existed for a few months and suffered many casualties in an action at Klip River on the Orange Free State Eastern Transvaal border in November 1901. It was disbanded early in 1902, and many scouts went on to serve in other units. Killed in action near Platrand, 12th of November 1901, and Private W.J. Healy died at Pretoria, 2nd of August 1901, unveiled by Major General Sir Edmund Hutton. Now, I've got Hutton's book called Tales from the Veldt. He led the Australians up, and you'll notice all these dates from 1901. That's when they were pushing up towards the Boer capitals, Bloemfontein and Pretoria. So it was unveiled on the May the 30th, 1903. He's not at all a fancy. Yeah, look at all those names. I can't read them all, I don't think. The Brunswick boys. There's also a fair chance I'll get killed if I step onto the... They look fairly new. I reckon they've been re-etched or something. And on this side, yeah, just more names. Oh, that was brilliant. I'm glad we found that. Yeah, it looks like they've redone it for some reason. Okay, well, we can tick off Brunswick now. Where my grampy grew up. As I said, he was a postman here, I believe. Alright, stop recording. Stop recording.